I guess my point being is there's always going to be a fight. There's always going to be a struggle. Um, but we've proven, especially through the AIDS epidemic. I mean, you just look at that example of how the queer community came together to save each other's lives.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Duke's Download. I'm Duke Mason, and I'm so excited to chat today with the Marc Malkin, a Variety's senior culture and events editor, red carpet legend, host of the Just for Variety podcast, and a leading voice in entertainment journalism and LGBTQ plus advocacy. Fresh off his powerful role hosting the American Heart Association's Red Dress Collection, Red Carpet and Concert in 2026, where he opened up about his open heart surgery last year. Marc's story is super inspiring, and we're talking health scares, Hollywood highs, queer representation in media. And Marc, I so appreciate you being here. Thanks for jumping on.
I'm so happy to be here. This is exciting.
I've always been a fan of yours, going back to watching you on
Thank you.
E! News when I was a teenager, and all the way to today. I mean, I think
You know what? You know what? Teenager, I hate you.
Well, I'm not. Well, I was about to say, well, I'm not that old, but anyway, no. And that sounds even worse.
Yeah.
But anyway, you get my. But you just seem to be getting bigger and bigger in terms of your presence and your success. So again, thank you for being here. To start off, in terms of your personal affairs as of late, I know you had open heart surgery last year, and it was right after you covered the Oscars. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it will be on March 19th. It'll be a year since I had open heart surgery. And it was supposed to literally be, the Oscars are on a Sunday. I was supposed to go in that Friday for the surgery, but because of some scheduling stuff with the hospital, I went in a week later than that. But yeah, I basically went through most of award season last year knowing that at the end of it, I wasn't going to go on vacation, but I was going to go under the knife.
I mean, I know I did some reading about what had happened, but how long before you actually had the surgery did you know exactly what the extent of the issue was?
So I've been seeing a cardiologist for many years. I had a heart murmur, and then there's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, which, comes with being in midlife, comes with being a Jew in midlife. So I was under the care of a cardiologist, and then unfortunately my brother died of a heart attack at age 54. And when I went to my cardiologist and I said, my brother has died of a heart attack, she said, what kind of heart attack? And we didn't know. All his death certificate said was cardiac episode. So she immediately ordered a full workup of my heart, which started with genetic testing. And truth be told, I put genetic testing off for about a year. I was really scared of it. I kind of understood genetic testing. What I knew of it really was my mom had MS. And I remember going to my doctor at the time and saying, my mom has MS, I want to be tested for the gene. And he said, well, you don't want to be tested for the gene for MS because, one, if you have the gene for MS, doesn't mean you're going to develop the disease. And if you do have the gene, there's nothing you could do to prevent you from getting MS if you were going to get it. So that sort of was in my head when she said genetic testing for my heart. So I put it off for a year. And then once we did genetic testing, they didn't find any mutations. There was nothing genetically saying I was predisposed to any sort of heart issue. But then they did more tests, CAT scans, MRIs, and all these words that I can't pronounce. And they found an aneurysm on my aorta.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you said, how long after that did you have to put it off because of all the work that you knew was coming with the Oscars? And
well,
was that I mean, because that's under any circumstance, that's an unbelievably high pressure job. So I can only imagine when you have that physical component that you have to be mindful of. I can't even imagine.
So my surgeon. I sat down with my surgeon, my first consultation, and I was put into a monitoring program to monitor the aorta to see if it was getting wider. If it was getting wider, it gets to a point where you need surgery. So he finally sat me down and said, I think it's time for surgery. It's preventative. It's elective. It's not an emergency situation. I didn't have an episode. I didn't have a heart attack. I didn't have an aortic rupture or a tear or I can't think of the word right now.
Yeah.
But so the first thing I said to him was, well, you probably hear this a lot at Cedars-Sinai in Beverly Hills. Can I wait until after the Oscars? He asked me when they were. I said, I can't believe you're a doctor in Beverly Hills and you don't know when the Oscars are. But then I told him the date and he said you could wait. But that said, as of that point, I had stopped working out, exercising, lifting anything heavy, obviously being much more conscious of things. But as long as my surgeon said it's okay, if he would have said, no, you need the surgery now, I would have done it. That said, I was probably in a little bit of denial because the issue with an aneurysm on your aorta is most of the time there's no symptoms. I had absolutely no symptoms. So I wasn't walking around in pain. I wasn't short of breath. I wasn't fatigued. I mean, I actually don't know what my fatigue level is because I'm always working. So if I was fatigued from this, I didn't know it. But
you're in a constant state of, you're just go, go, go. So you're not really thinking about how you feel or, I mean, it's just, it's, there's too much going on to stop and take stock.
Yeah. So we, on March 19th, at about 2 p.m., I went under the knife. They did what's called the David procedure, which is basically they scraped the aneurysm out of my aorta and then wrap my aorta in a synthetic graft and pull it tight to, strengthen the walls of the aorta. And my surgeon said to me, he goes, when you're fully healed, you could power lift if you wanted to. I'm not going to. But it was good to know that they weren't just repairing me to keep me as status quo, but they were literally making my aorta healthy again.
It would give you a whole new lease on life, essentially. I mean,
it did. I mean, it really, physically, obviously, it changed me. I don't feel physically so much of a difference because, like I said, there were no symptoms. Emotionally and mentally, I'm a different person in many, many ways. A lot of emotional healing went on because when you have open heart surgery, they have to shut your heart and your lungs off for an hour at least with a heart and lung machine. And what I keep telling people is, if your heart and lungs are shut off for an hour, guess what? Nothing else matters. It really puts everything in perspective.
Absolutely. And also given what happened to your brother. So, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of different emotions and different thoughts going on there. No, but how long after you had the surgery did you go back to work?
It was probably about a month from home.
That's not long.
It's not. And I have to say, the recovery from this surgery is not as crazy as you think it would be. Because I think a lot of people, when they think heart surgery, also, they think people who are much older. So obviously recovery is much harder. I was in pretty good shape to begin with. So about a month, I was starting to do work from home, back on red carpets, 2 months.
Wow. 2 months. I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, has it affected your, I know you said physically you don't feel different, but in terms of the pace of your work and your ability to work in terms of the consistency and the constant movement, has it affected your work or your daily life at all? Not at all.
No,
If anything, you're saying things are better, basically.
Yeah, it hasn't affected my daily life in the sense of like, oh, I can't do this or I can't eat that. It's affected me in the sense of like, now it's like, if I want to slow down, I just slow down. If I want to take a night off, where before it was like every night was something. It's just, that's the nature of what I do for work. If I'm not covering a red carpet, I'm at an event for something else. I definitely don't question myself as much when I say, oh, you know what, I don't want to go to that. I'm like, you know what, I don't want to go to that because I just want to rest.
Yeah.
So I do.
Absolutely. No, makes sense. I mean, another event that you're working on that you're participating in soon is you're going to be the red carpet host at the American Heart Association's Red Dress Collection event, including the big 2026 concert. And how has your survivor experience deepened your connection to the event? I'm assuming, were you involved with the organization before, or was that a
No,
newfound connection?
no. So the American Heart Association, the Red Dress Collection and concert was last. I don't know when this will run, but it was about a week ago since we're talking.
I see.
Um, so what happened was when I knew I was going to have the surgery, I called a friend of mine who I forgot worked at the American Heart Association. And I said,
Wow.
I'm having open heart surgery. Yeah, I just felt like I needed to check in.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that that week I was going to an event where the CEO and president of the American Heart Association was going to be there. So I got to meet her and we talked through my surgery. And then once I was through my surgery, I said, listen, I want to get involved because, like I said before, there's no symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So really to detect if you have an aneurysm, it's about awareness. There's two ways you find out you have it. One, you have an episode, which many are pretty much fatal, or you get tested and they find it in time. So I'm very much about raising awareness, letting people know that if you have heart issues, heart history in your family, get a referral for a cardiologist, sit down with a cardiologist, tell the cardiologist your history, and let your cardiologist determine what kind of tests you may or may not have. And I've seen my work. I've sort of seen the what's the word I'm looking for? I've seen that my work works because I have a lot of friends who are now seeing a cardiologist and getting tested and finding some things out. No one has found out, at least that I know, anything too serious, but things that that they could take care of. Because the thing about most heart health and heart disease and issues is a lot of it is preventative if you just follow some simple rules.
Well, one thing I saw in the midst of my research is I had no idea. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women,
Yeah.
which I had no idea. I mean, that's an
Yeah,
unbelievable statistic.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and I learned a lot more about that, during the Red Dress Collection event, because people just associate heart disease with men. They really do, and because they associate it with men, so much of the education and the talk and the symptoms are around men's symptoms. Heart disease shows up differently symptomatically with women. So this Red Dress event was just incredible. And it was also like a time where I just bonded with a lot of other open heart surgery people, and we're showing each other our scars. And it is sort of, you become part of this kind of special club, I guess.
It must have been, I can only imagine. I mean, it must be on stage and having that, connecting with people and also telling your story. It must have been kind of an emotional experience.
Yeah, it is. It's, it now.
I know in terms of advocacy, a lot of your work has been, as for me, a lot of it's been LGBT focused. So, I mean, but in the same way, I can imagine for you, in the same way that knowing, being out and being out there as giving visibility, in the same way, knowing that your story might have or definitely is having an impact, must have been kind of an empowering or it must have given you some satisfaction knowing that.
Yeah, I have lived most of my life very publicly in terms of my journeys and my struggles, whether it's been my recovery, whether it's been being HIV positive, just being queer, and now obviously my heart issues. And I've just always, in my mind, I was like, if I have this, this little platform I could use to help someone, when I came out as HIV positive, it got some attention because of my life at E! News. And, I was hearing from people literally all over the world sending me messages asking me I'm gay. I live in this small village in Italy. What do I do? And I'm not going to pretend to be a therapist or I'm not going to try to counsel anyone in that way. But we all know what it means to be a little gay boy feeling like you're literally the only one.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
and I came from a very gay family, and I still felt alone.
Yeah. And people always ask the same thing with me. And people always say to me, "Oh, in many ways it was easier anyway than it would be, I'm sure, for most." But people always say to me, "Oh, it must have been so great." I'm like, "Well, I mean, it was great, but I still felt that sense of fear and not knowing." Whether you should tell anybody or when to tell people or who to tell first. I mean, all those same issues are kind of universal, I think, at least for people of a certain, I think things maybe have changed a little bit. And not everywhere, but in some places, but it's still a pretty
Yeah,
universal experience by and large.
yeah. I mean, for me, I was coming out in the late '80s. My mom was a closeted lesbian, and she had two gay brothers who, at the same time, were dying of AIDS.
Wow.
Um, so I remember, I was a student at Boston University. I went to a gay student group. I don't even know if they exist anymore. Um, and everyone said, "Oh my God, it's going to be so easy to come out to your family. Two gay uncles, a gay mother." I'm like, all the books are written for gay kids to come out to their straight parents.
Hmm.
There's no manual on how to come out to your gay parents. And it's no matter whether you're coming out to a gay parent or a straight parent, you're basically telling your parents what you do in bed.
Yeah.
That's
Well, it's
not a
funny.
comfortable.
I don't know if we're going to release this interview first or after, but literally, I just spoke to this guy Zach Sullivan, who is an out gay hockey player,
Mhm.
and it was fascinating because it was just true. He's like, look, I'm happy to talk about it because if it helps one person out there, who. But at the same time, when you stop and think about what you're doing, he's like, I basically sat my parents down and said, like, I've had boyfriends. I like to have sex with men. Like, it's kind of an
Yeah.
odd concept when you think about it, but yet
Yeah.
it is an integral part of who you are, and it does help people. You know,
Yeah. For me, when I came out to my mom, she hadn't come out to me yet. It was a very unspoken, non-secret secret that my mom was gay. So when I came out to her, she cried. Not crying
yeah.
out of I don't support you. She said to me, "I don't want the life for you that
Yep.
me and my brothers have had." So she was coming from a place
Wow.
of knowing. You know,
Yep.
at that point, it's 1989, um,
Wow.
which is crazy to think that it was only 20 years after Stonewall.
Right.
um, but just to explain to my mom, things are different now. I'm
Yep.
not going, sadly, I'm not going to die like my uncles are probably. At that point, we knew they would die. It was a death sentence when you had AIDS in 1989.
Yep.
Um, but she cried. She cried. She said, "I don't want this life for you." And I said, "I'm going to be okay, Mom. I'm going to be okay." And I've been out ever since before then, obviously, when I was in school. But, I've never hid my sexuality, ever.
Hmm.
I started my career in the gay press. So,
Hmm.
top of my resume, there
Oh,
it
you
is.
did. That's interesting. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that because my next question for you was going to be obviously you've spanned print, you've been on television. I mean, you've worked for some of the biggest both print and television outlets in America and the world. But you started in the gay press. That's interesting. What was your first outlet that you worked for?
My first job was at a newspaper in Boston called Bay Windows. It was a
Of course, yeah.
weekly gay
Privy Windows.
newspaper for New England. And at the time, I think I was saying to you earlier, behind here, you can see this check is for $25, October 9th, 1990, for a
Wow.
newspaper called the South End News, which is a weekly newspaper in Boston, sister publication to Bay Windows. I get my job at Bay Windows. I get offered the job. I go to my favorite professor, who I hadn't sort of, I'm backtracking now
Yep.
after saying that I've always been out. This professor I still hadn't come out to. And he was my favorite professor. He was like this gonzo journalist. And I said, "I got a new job writing." And he said, "Where?" And I said, "Bay Windows." And he said, "What is that?" And I said, "A gay newspaper." And he said, "You've just ruined your career." Now, He said that not out of a place of homophobia. He said that out of a place of knowing what newsrooms were like. You know, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and he
Yep.
knew this was not a place for someone who was gay.
Yep.
There were no Anderson Coopers. There were no, Don Lemons, Robin Roberts.
Yep.
You name the gay journalist that they just didn't exist openly.
Nope.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And this is 1991. This is when Clinton was starting his first presidential campaign. And the two major issues at the time were gays in the military and the AIDS epidemic.
Yep.
So what I ended up finding was that I was competing with mainstream press because they were covering those issues too. And what was happening also at the same time, especially in Boston, was that politicians were realizing the gay vote.
Yep.
They realized that vote can make a difference. So I'm 21, 22, being invited into City Hall to sit down one-on-one with the mayor of Boston because they wanted that gay vote. So I always looked at my job. Yes, I work for the gay press. I just looked at it as I'm a journalist who's on the gay beat.
You're right. And Bill Clinton was kind of the first the first presidential candidate to really embrace the gay community because, I mean, not to go on I'm a bit of a political junkie, but I know that like even with Michael Dukakis, I think I remember reading a story somewhere that his campaign like got a big donation from some big gay group and rejected it. And because there was a fear before then of like being associated with the gays. Yeah. But Bill Clinton was this is a constituency that not only can I raise money from, but that within the Democratic primary anyway, it could be a valuable constituency. So,
I mean, it was amazing because it was, the Democratic National Convention had Bob, I feel so bad, I'm forgetting his name. Bob Hattoy.
Was he an AIDS activist?
Yes, who was very, very close to the Clintons back in Arkansas. I think that's where their relationship went.
I think I remember. And then, of course, David Mixner, I know, was involved too in the campaign.
David Mixner, of course. And then the Republicans had someone who was HIV positive. Her name was Mary Fisher, I think. She was a socialite, big Republican donor, I believe, an incredible speaker, and spoke about living with HIV. I believe she got it in a hospital and blood transfusion. And then just covering gays in the military. I remember going to Harvard, and it was a graduation, and Colin Powell was speaking. And students got up, turned their back on him, and raised pink balloons.
Yep.
I get chills thinking about that now. I remember going up to New Hampshire. I have photos of this with ACT UP. I was embedded with ACT UP. And them doing die-ins in the streets of New Hampshire. It was George W. Bush was running. Paul Tsongas, if you're a real political nerd, you'll know who that is.
Senator from Massachusetts,
Yeah, and
say it just to prove that I know what I'm talking about. I know anything about is politics, the only thing. So everything else is useless. But
it just so happens I was just talking to an editor of mine and talking about Massachusetts and Democrats in Massachusetts and how it's such a blue state, but there was this conservative, thread through there because of Catholicism and what I was talking about.
Bill Weld and Mitt Romney and Charlie Baker. I mean, they've had a bunch of Republicans from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Bill Weld, I think he won. I was still living in Boston at the time, I think, when he first won, but he was a very liberal Republican. He wasn't,
right?
Because wasn't he a Democrat? Anyway,
he was super.
We won't get into the whole Bill Weld of it all.
More socially liberal. Yeah, I could talk about this stuff for hours.
Yeah, so I could too. Another podcast, I'll tell you about visiting the Hyannis, the compound, when Joe Kennedy, the congressman, the father of the younger Joe Kennedy, would invite the press there every Labor Day or Memorial Day. Anyway, and Rose Kennedy was still alive at the time. Anyway,
unbelievable.
But I was in the gay press, and it was great. And then I ended up getting recruited in 1993 or 94 by Gannett. at the National Lesbian Gay Journalists Association, which had just started. They did their first job fair at their convention. I was the first person recruited from it.
Wow.
By Gannett. And at the time, Gannett had a program called Mainstreaming 2000, which was their DEI program for their newspapers for the year 2000. They would literally tell all their newspapers, send us your copy of your newspaper from like April 25th. And they would grade it to see what kind of diversity they had.
Wow.
This is, mid 90s, early 90s. Yeah. And I was this out gay newspaper reporter in Norwich, Connecticut.
Wow.
Just a town reporter, like covering incinerator issues and listening to police scanners on a Sunday night and going to the crime scene. And then eventually I got back to New York where I grew up, and that's where my entertainment career started. I'm blabbering because
no, I find it fascinating. I had no idea about all this. No, I find it fascinating because obviously, like I said, I'm very familiar with your entertainment career, having been a fan and watcher, follower for a long time now. But what, out of curiosity, what was that first entertainment gig? Like, what was that? What was the first entertainment outlet that you first worked for?
My first entertainment outlet I went to go work for was a monthly magazine called Premiere.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
It was a movie magazine, like Entertainment Weekly, but on a monthly basis, movies. Yeah.
So was entertainment and film and music, all that, was that always a passion of yours? Or was that
gay.
Sort of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that kind of says it all. Yeah.
So listen, when I was a kid, I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to, my dream was to fly through the air and dance and sing on Broadway. That's what I wanted to do. My family didn't know what to do with that. Literally, that's what I dreamt of that. My family didn't know what to do with that. They let me get headshots. I went on a couple of auditions. And it wasn't, I didn't have a momager. So I went to go work for Premiere. I didn't know what Premiere was.
Yeah.
I was a good typist. I took a transcribing test. In Boston, I was writing for the Boston Globe, the Boston Phoenix, which was now defunct, but was their sort of weekly alternative newspaper. So I had all this experience. But when I went back to New York, it was like, oh, that's cute. You're going to be an editorial assistant. So I was a little on the older side to be an editorial assistant. But yeah, Premiere is where I started. I learned what a personal publicist was. I didn't know what those were. And I started covering, somewhere in my office. I started a page in the magazine called VIP Scene, which was a party page. And I went to all these premieres and just interviewed celebrities. And that was 30 years ago last year. So this is 31 years in entertainment journalism.
When did the on-camera part start? Because, I mean, as I've mentioned now a couple of times, I don't mean to rub it in, but like, since I was 12 or 13 years old, I mean, watching E! News, which my mom and dad and I, that was what we would watch at dinner every single night. You were a part of our lives and a part of many people's lives. But when did that on-camera reporting aspect or hosting part start?
So it started when I was always in magazines. So I worked for, I'll just give you the Premiere, Us Weekly, New York Daily News, New York Magazine, went back to Us Weekly. And when I was in magazines and newspapers, I was a talking head on all these shows. You watch whatever entertainment show.
Not a pundit, but like a commentator, basically.
Yeah, and if I broke a story, they'd have me on, so on and so forth. But my true red carpet on camera started when I was at E! News. I was sort of a bridge between E! Online, which was digital, and E! News, which was linear television. Mm-hmm. At the time when I started, they didn't really interact that much. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the bridges for that. And one day, one of the supervising producers of E! News said to me, so let me backtrack. I remember sitting in my office getting a DVD of the pilot episode of Glee.
Well,
I still have it. I watched it and I cried. Mm-hmm. I literally cried going, why didn't I have this show when I was a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Cried like a baby. I became a huge Glee fan before it was even on the air. I was doing set visits before it even aired, so on and so forth. So I got friendly with the Glee folks. I'm not friends with them, but got friendly.
Yeah.
supervising producer of E! News calls me one day and says, I need someone to cover this gala that's happening. It's called a Butterfly Chrysalis Ball. I can't remember exactly. Leah Michelle and Corey Monteith are going to be there. Now, if you know your Glee history, Corey and Glee were the leads of the show. They were boyfriend and girlfriend on the show, their characters. But in real life, they were apparently dating.
Yep.
They never confirmed it, though. They would tease a little on Instagram, but never confirmed it. So they said, Mark, could you cover this for us on camera? And I said, sure. And I said in my head, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get Corey and Leah to admit that they're dating on camera. That's my, all the president's men moment in entertainment journalism.
Well, you got to go into it. You got to aim for the scoop. I mean, come on.
Right. So Leah comes on the carpet first. I interview her. I said, oh, who's your date for tonight? And she goes, oh, me and my girlfriends, and gives me a wink. She knew what I was doing. She walks away. She's very media savvy. Corey, much newer to Hollywood, not as media savvy. And I just said to him, I said, is this a date night for you and Leah? And he said, yes.
Wow.
And that's
where
it all
you must have been like, yes.
I still do that to this day. If I get something, I literally go, yes.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say two Glee related things. One, but like one of them is a little sad, but the other one, it's funny when I was talking earlier about us, how a lot of people, I'd say pre a certain time, have mostly a sort of similar experience in terms of what like coming out was like. But I was alluding to that before, but I was really thinking about in my head was sort of the pre and post Glee era, because I really do think that, like, I remember vividly, I came out in 2006 when I was 14, and I remember.
I went to work for E. I went to work for E. I went to work for E in 2006.
Yep. No, I remember very well.
I know you remember.
But it was interesting, like I remember I came out in 2006. I graduated high school in 2010. And I remember in my college dorm room seeing a bunch of kids or teenagers gathered around the TV in the common room or whatever. And I was like, what is that? And I looked at the TV and it was Glee. And I just remember even at that moment going like, things have changed in like a big way, because even for people my age, people that came of age in the 2000s, yes, we had occasionally a gay character on a TV show. I mean, yes, that existed, but I feel like Glee was that moment when it fully became fully part of the culture in a way that it really wasn't before. Like, I remember going on YouTube when I was 15 and having to find old gay indie movies on YouTube and stuff, I mean, I feel like that was really the sort of the point where things changed forever in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, the visibility because of Glee, at the same time, Modern Family.
Right.
I honestly couldn't believe that these shows existed. And I was interviewing all of them, and then what was amazing as a reporter, the big question was, when were they going to have a same-sex kiss on Glee and even Modern Family?
Yep.
I remember constantly asking Chris Colfer, Darren Criss, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, when's the kiss coming? When's the kiss coming? Now it's absurd to think about it, but it was just that one step in the evolution of acceptance of, I hate the word tolerance, and now
celebrating diversity and it just even now, my new Glee in a way is heated rivalry in the sense of course we're going to talk about heated rivalry in the sense of I can't believe this show exists. Yeah.
But there are people who have
become the biggest show on HBO since White Lotus. I mean, it's who would have thought? Who would have thought?
And to think that heated rivalry is sort of a Glee for another generation.
Right. No.
So that's when my on-camera life started.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention, this is a slight sidebar, but about Glee was, I'm sure you probably were there. I remember there was an event in probably 2010. Oh, it must have been 2011 actually. But it was an event at the Paley Center, and Corey Monteith and Leah Michelle were there together, and I remember being there and seeing them. And then he passed away not too long after. But that was such a tragedy when he died. But I remember seeing them in person, and then that what a horrible moment that was when that happened.
I remember the morning that we got the news because my boyfriend, who eventually turned into my husband, who's now my ex-husband, we were in bed, and he rolled over and he said, "Corey Monteith's dead." This was also a time when I was in my beginning of recovery, my struggles. So it was really, and I knew Corey had been sober. He had spoken openly about it at one point, I believe. I remember the first time talking to Corey. It was a theater, I think, in Glendale. It was the episode they were filming where Leah sang "Don't Rain on My Parade." Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting on the stairs in this theater interviewing Corey, and he was using language of recovery. So I knew he was in recovery. And his death was, any death of a young person, obviously, is horrible. Add on top of that the tragedy of addiction. And it's just, it's heartbreaking.
I knew that topic was a bit of a downer, but when you brought him up, I just thought, I remembered that moment.
You can't help but think of it, and he was such a sweet man, so yeah.
On a slightly lighter note, considering how much incredible work you've done, I know this is probably a tough question, but in terms of if I asked you, like, what are some of the most, on a personal level, but just in terms of your career, some of the most memorable and just moments where you've gone like, wow, like this was just, whether it's someone you interviewed or an event that you covered, obviously the Oscars doesn't get bigger than that, but just, are there certain moments that you look back on where you go, that was just a pinch me moment?
There are a lot.
There are probably a lot.
You're
probably quite a few.
And I think that's because I love what I do so much.
Yeah.
I love my job as much today as I did the first time I went to work for Premiere. That's not hyperbole. That's not exaggeration. Everyone knows that about me. But are there moments? Yes. My first podcast interview with Barbara Streisand.
Wow.
I mean, for a gay Jew from New York whose family is from Brooklyn, and I've done it twice with her now. There's most recently being an announcer at the Golden Globes to hear my voice saying "Marty Supreme," one battle after another. Like, I was a kid and I would listen to this and be like, who's that voice? Who gets to do that?
Yep.
And I was one of the people doing it this year. I'm not saying this out of false modesty, out of false it's what? I do not come from this world. I do not come from a show business family. There's no Nepo anywhere connected to me. I had a great uncle who was a VP at United Artists. That's as close as I got. But everything that I've gotten, I've worked really, really hard. So, there's moments, like I said, Streisand, Golden Globes, many, many stories I've broken over the years. When I break a story or when I just get that good quote, when I come home and I have what I call a good red carpet, I'm bouncing off the walls like a kid in a candy store. I can't believe that I'm the one on the red carpet. And people like yourself who tells me, oh, I watched you growing up. Like, I'm flattered. I joke saying, stop calling me so old, but I'm flattered because I know, I've worked hard.
Well, you've been a part of the cultural zeitgeist for a long time now. I mean, I know we already kind of covered heated rivalry, but
Go ahead.
I want to ask you. I could talk to you literally, as I said, for hours, but sort of as a final general observation, like, do you feel, given, you know, acknowledging, from the get-go that there are obviously a lot of challenges, both politically, culturally, for the LGBTQ plus community, do you feel hopeful? And also, like, in terms of the current state of LGBT representation in film and television and culture, do you feel, do you think things are going well? Do you think things are, are you optimistic about the future? Like, how do you feel about the current state of affairs?
It's a mixed bag. You
Hmm.
have something like heated rivalry. Can't get any
Hmm.
gayer than that. But
Sure.
then when you talk to filmmakers, you talk to creatives, and they will
Yeah.
tell you they're having a hard time selling their queer movie, their queer TV show. Um, when I see the
Well, that's
trans
why, like,
community
not to
being,
interrupt you, but like, my friend Greg White wrote uh, Boots, was a book
yeah,
that Boots was a producer, and I haven't
yep,
talked to him about it, so I don't want to I don't want to like speak for him, but I will say, that was such a weird one because it was like one of the biggest shows on Netflix, and of course there were rumors that it got canceled because of pressure from the Trump administration, and so I mean, but it's fascinating how, to your point, there seems to be some fear or reticence around gay themed projects, and yet you have this cultural phenomenon with heated rivalry. So it's a weird dichotomy there.
but but it's always been there as the movement has
Right.
progressed. You
Right.
know, when you had Stonewall in '69, and for almost 20 years, visibility, visibility, visibility,
Yeah.
and then the epidemic. So the
Yep.
backlash, we can't even understand what that backlash was. That people
Yep.
didn't want to sit next to someone who is gay, thinking that person has AIDS, and if you breathe the same air as them, you're going to
Right.
die.
Um,
There were people who were calling for people with HIV to be tattooed
and quarantine. I remember
and
that.
quarantined.
Jesse
And
Helms. Like,
Jesse Helms, but got to give all that credit to ACT UP putting a giant condom on his house. Um, Google it, people. Google. We're a resilient community. We're fighters. We don't have any other choice
mhm.
but to fight and continue. So there's going to be some steps back. There's going to be some steps forward. In an ideal world, we just keep moving forward. But I was in New York recently, and I'm co-chairing a gala for the Ali Forney Center,
Of
which
course. Yeah.
is the housing group for homeless LGBTQ youth in New York. And I took a tour of one of their facilities, and they were telling me that 50% of their clients say the reason that they're homeless is because of the religious beliefs of their family. They're thrown out of their home because of the religious beliefs. Religion's not going away,
Yeah.
so we're always going to have that. But we know we're West Coast, East Coast.
Yeah.
There's that whole I guess my point being is there's always going to be a fight. There's always going to be a struggle.
Mhm.
But we've proven, especially through the AIDS epidemic. I mean, you just look at that example of how the queer community came together to save each other's lives. There's nothing like it. It's bittersweet to think about because it was a community nursing the community into their graves. But they
Mhm.
did it with such power, with such conviction and desperation
Mhm.
because we were the only ones, they only had each other. I hope
Mhm.
that answered your question.
No, it absolutely does. No, and I mean, again, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm so grateful for the time. Congratulations on everything you're doing. I mean,
Oh,
it just
thank
seems
you.
like you keep getting bigger and bigger. So it's you should be really proud, and thank you for all the great advocacy you're doing too. Means a lot.
No, and I'm so glad that we finally got to meet. I know we chatted a little bit
Oh,
on
yeah,
Instagram, and then I think it was the Project Angel Food that we
it
officially
was.
met. I was just there this morning. They're unveiling their new campus. It's pretty incredible.
Wow. Wow. I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah.
I love Richard, the
Yeah,
executive director. He's fantastic. He's a great
yeah,
guy.
it's one half of the new campus. It's the Chuck Lorre, campus because he donated $10 million
Wow. I didn't know that.
towards a
Wow.
$51.5 million project. So it's the first building they unveiled. The next
Wow.
building breaks ground, I think, this summer.
Wow. It's incredible. Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah.
it's great. Thank you for supporting them as well. But thank you, Mark. Much
Oh,
appreciated. See you soon.
same here.
Hopefully.
Thanks, Duke.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It was a great episode. Love Marc Malkin. I thought it went really well. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like, subscribe. Don't forget to share your comments, share your feedback. And if you want to email me, the email address is in the caption below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and see you next week. Thank you for joining me today on Duke's Download. This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by me, Duke Mason, and produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig. Original music composed by Nell Balaban. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps others to discover the show. I'd love to stay connected with you, so join the conversation by following me at James Duke Mason on Instagram and X, or by emailing me at questions@dukesdownload.com.